The whole time he was hooked up to morphine. So when they got him well, they kicked him out the door. He had a little twitch in his.
Jake the Snake, the Jake Roberts story takes you on a raw, honest journey through the life of one of wrestling's most enigmatic and complex figures. From his rise as a captivating and cunning performer in the ring, to the painful battles he fought with addiction and personal demons behind the scenes. This documentary digs deep into the man behind the legendary Snake. Known for his psychological mastery and unforgettable charisma, Jake Roberts' story is one of triumph, tragedy, and ultimate redemption. More than just a wrestling icon, this is a human story about resilience, struggle, and the long road to healing. Whether you're a lifelong fan or new to his legacy, get ready to discover the real Jake Roberts, warts, wisdom, and all. Early life, roots in pain and wrestling. Aurelian Smith, later known to the wrestling world as Jake the Snake Roberts, was born on May 30th, 1955, in Gainesville, Texas. But his early life was anything but easy. His father, Grizzly Smith, was a wrestler, meaning the family was steeped in the sports culture from the beginning. Yet beneath the surface of the wrestling legacy was a home filled with hardship. Aurelian, along with his siblings Robin and Michael, grew up in a household marked by pain and trauma. The details of that childhood are heavy, often left unsaid because they're so raw and disturbing. But it's clear those early years left deep emotional scars. For many kids, childhood is a time of innocence and discovery, but for Aurelian, it was a time of survival. Wrestling, paradoxically, became a refuge. Even though it was tied to his father, the world of wrestling offered a sense of order and meaning amid chaos. The drama of the ring, the clear lines between heroes and villains, the fights where justice seemed to prevail, was a beacon of hope for him and his brother Robin. Sitting together watching matches, they found moments of comfort and escape. This fascination planted the seeds of what would become more than a pastime. It became a calling. The birth of Jake the Snake, crafting a unique wrestling persona. By 1974, Aurelian was ready to step into the ring himself, beginning his wrestling career on the regional circuits of Louisiana. Right from the start, he stood out, not because he was the biggest or loudest, but because of the eerie calm and quiet menace he brought. Wrestling at that time was full of brash characters who relied on shouting and flashy muscles to get attention. But Jake was different. His character was cold, calculating, and unnervingly quiet. He used his words sparingly, choosing each one like a dagger, delivering promos in a soft, almost hypnotic tone that made fans lean closer, compelled to listen. Jake's wrestling style matched his persona perfectly. He wasn't interested in just brute force. He was about mind games. His opponents weren't merely rivals, they were prey. He played a psychological chess game, breaking them down mentally before the physical contest even began. This cerebral, slow-burning approach was a stark contrast to many wrestlers of his time and quickly made him memorable on the territory circuits, like Mid-South Wrestling, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, and Georgia Championship Wrestling. The wrestling territories back then were a tough, competitive world. Wrestlers traveled endlessly, working multiple shows a week, navigating not just rivalries in the ring, but complicated backstage politics. The arrival of Damien, a living symbol of fear. If Jake the Snake Roberts was all about psychological tension, then Damien, his massive python, was the perfect embodiment of that fear. Damien wasn't some rubber prop or a staged accessory. He was very much alive, a real snake that slithered alongside Jake and became a living extension of his eerie persona. Imagine the image: Jake calmly walking down the ramp, the huge python coiling around his neck or trailing behind him, its cold, unblinking eyes mesmerizing the crowd. The sight itself was enough to send shivers through the audience, stirring a primal unease that only something so unpredictable and wild could evoke. Damien was more than just a gimmick. It was a powerful symbol. In wrestling, where characters often rely on costumes or catchphrases, having a real animal added an authentic edge to Jake's character. The snake represented raw, instinctive fear, the kind we all feel deep down but rarely see on display so boldly. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and completely alien to the polished, larger-than-life world of professional wrestling. When Jake entered the arena with Damian, fans immediately knew that they were about to witness something different, something dark, sinister, and gripping. The move that changed wrestling, the DDT. While Jake's character and Damian helped him stand out, his in-ring innovation would leave a lasting mark on wrestling history. That innovation came in the form of the DDT, a move that has since become a staple in wrestling everywhere. What makes the DDT story so fascinating is how much it was born from accident and instinct rather than meticulous planning. Early in his career, during a live event, Jake had an opponent locked in a headlock. As he tried to control the situation, he suddenly tripped and fell backward. Instead of losing control, this unplanned stumble drove the opponent's head forcefully into the mat, creating a shocking moment that immediately electrified the crowd. Jake quickly realized he'd stumbled upon something special. From there, he refined the technique, making it both safe to perform and visually devastating. But the DDT was never just about physical impact, it was storytelling in motion. It fit Jake's calculated, cold character perfectly. He didn't rush or overexert. Instead, he would methodically set up the move, the ring falling silent in anticipation. Then, with brutal precision, he'd execute the DDT, snapping his opponent's head into the mat like a hammer. Fans loved it. They would chant Jake's name, the energy in the arena rising as they awaited the move that often spelled doom for his opponents. Breaking through, WWE and national spotlight. Jake's distinctive style and unique presence eventually caught the eye of Vince McMahon and the WWE, who signed him in 1986. This transition from regional territories to a national stage was huge. Suddenly, Jake's slow-burning menace and dark charisma could be seen by millions, and the impact was immediate. His debut at WrestleMania 2 was unforgettable. He defeated George Wells, but more than that, he made a statement by draping Damian, the giant python, across his defeated opponent. It was a visual moment that instantly defined Jake's character on the grandest stage in wrestling. That image of the snake slithering over a defeated foe became iconic, signaling the arrival of a new kind of wrestling star. Not long after, Jake found himself embroiled in high-profile feuds. One of the most memorable was with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, a matchup that contrasted Jake's cold menace with Ricky's fiery energy. On an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, Jake pushed the boundaries by slamming Steamboat onto the unforgiving concrete floor outside the ring. The moment was shocking and brutal, unlike anything fans had seen before. It blurred the lines between performance and real danger, earning Jake a reputation as a fearless and unpredictable competitor who wasn't afraid to break the rules. The Snake Pit. Master of the mic, Jake's in-ring skills were remarkable, but what truly set him apart was his ability to connect through his words. WWE recognized this and gave him a unique platform, his own talk show segment called The Snake Pit. This wasn't just another promotional spot, it was a space where Jake's quiet intensity turned simple interviews into riveting psychological battles. Unlike the typical loud and brash promos, Jake's style on The Snake Pit was subtle but deeply effective. His calm, measured voice drew viewers in, creating an intimate atmosphere where tension simmered just below the surface. He had a knack for putting guests on edge, peeling back layers of their character while keeping his own enigmatic persona intact. Whether Jake was directly involved in the storyline or not, the Snake Pit became a key part of building anticipation and drama for WWE programming. One of the most famous moments from the segment was Jake's interview with Hulk Hogan, the biggest star of the era. The conversation seemed straightforward at first, but it ended with a shocking twist. Jake suddenly laid Hogan out with a brutal DDT right there on the set. The audience was stunned. Hogan was the ultimate hero, and seeing him attack so unexpectedly was a game changer. Wrestling with addiction behind the curtain, as Jake the Snake Roberts' star continued to rise, so too did the shadows lurking behind the scenes. The physical and emotional demands of professional wrestling weighed heavily on him. The grueling schedule, constant travel, and intense physical punishment were enough to challenge anyone. But for Jake, who carried the emotional scars of a traumatic childhood, the burden was even heavier. Wrestling was supposed to be his escape, his outlet, but it also became a place where pain and pressure built up, eventually pushing him down a darker path. One of the pivotal moments came after a backstage incident where Honky Tonk Man smashed a guitar over Jake's head during an interview segment. The injury was serious, and to manage the pain, Jake was prescribed medication. What started as a necessary step toward healing quickly spiraled into something much more dangerous. The painkillers offered temporary relief but soon led to dependency. From there, it was a slippery slope. Cocaine and alcohol entered the picture, feeding a destructive cycle that would follow Jake for years. While fans saw the charismatic, calculating villain in the ring, very few were aware of the battle Jake was fighting privately. His addiction wasn't just a personal struggle, it also affected his professional life, causing missed opportunities, strained relationships, and moments of instability. But amid all the chaos, Jake managed to channel his pain into his performances. His character took on a haunting depth, a raw authenticity that resonated with audiences. Behind the cold, steely eyes and quiet menace was a man wrestling far more than just his opponents. He was grappling with his own inner demons. Highs and lows in the ring. Even as addiction and personal struggles threatened to derail his career, Jake remained a master of his craft. He continued to deliver matches that combined psychological storytelling with physical prowess, proving why he was such a revered figure in wrestling. One standout chapter came in 1989 during his feud with Andre the Giant. Known for his imposing size and strength, Andre was a daunting opponent, but Jake found a way to use mind games to gain an edge. He played up the rumor that Andre was afraid of snakes, letting Damian become a tool of intimidation. The visual of Andre's hesitation whenever Jake's python slithered nearby added a unique psychological twist that kept fans captivated. Another memorable storyline revolved around the $1 Million Championship and Ted DiBiase. Jake's cunning and grit shone as he battled DiBiase's arrogance and wealth, embodying the classic wrestling underdog who wasn't afraid to fight dirty or use his wits to stay in the game. These feuds highlighted Jake's versatility, not just as a wrestler, but as a storyteller who could elevate any match with layers of character and tension. Perhaps one of Jake's most impressive performances came at WrestleMania 7 in 1991 in a blindfold match against Rick the Model Martel. Gimmick matches often risk falling flat or feeling gimmicky, but Jake found a way to turn it into a crowd-pleasing event. The death of Damian and a dark turn in 1991, the line between fiction and reality blurred in one of the most emotionally charged storylines of Jake's career. On an episode of Superstars of Wrestling, Jake's beloved python, Damian, was killed in a brutal segment where the wrestler Earthquake literally crushed the snake underfoot. For fans who had come to see Damian as an inseparable part of Jake's identity, this was devastating. The snake wasn't just a prop, it was a symbol of Jake's dark mystique and his psychological edge. Though Jake introduced a new snake named Lucifer to replace Damian, the impact of that storyline lingered. It marked a turning point in his career. Something had changed, and the energy around Jake shifted. Not long after Damian's death, Jake shocked the wrestling world by turning heel, a dramatic shift from the complex anti-hero to a darker, more sinister figure. He aligned himself with The Undertaker in a chilling alliance against the Ultimate Warrior, one of the most popular wrestlers of the era. Jake's explanation was simple, yet loaded with menace. "You should never trust a snake." The phrase was haunting, a perfect echo of his persona and the darker path he had taken. The Snake Attack, a harrowing moment on Superstars of Wrestling. The intensity of Jake the Snake, Roberts' feud with Randy Macho Man Savage, reached a terrifying peak on October 21, 1991, during an episode of Superstars of Wrestling. This was no ordinary wrestling segment. It was a moment that blurred the lines between performance and real danger, embedding itself in the memories of fans forever. The setup was chilling. Jake had Savage tied to the ring ropes, helpless and vulnerable, while his infamous pet cobra, an emblem of his sinister persona, was brought into the spotlight. Now, wrestling fans knew Jake's cobra wasn't just a prop, it was a living, breathing creature that added an unsettling edge to his character. For this stunt, the snake had been carefully deveined, a precaution to prevent fatal bites, but it had not been defanged. That detail would prove crucial. When the cobra struck, sinking its fangs deep into Savage's arm, panic rippled through the ring. Jake, known for his cool, menacing demeanor, suddenly faced a real crisis. The snake refused to release its grip. Blood began to trickle from the wound, and the atmosphere grew heavy with genuine concern. The cameras captured Jake's frantic attempts to pry the snake off, his hands trembling slightly as the seconds dragged on. This wasn't just scripted drama. It was a live moment where the unpredictability of using a live animal came crashing down. For viewers, especially the children watching at home, it was terrifying. Reports from that night recall many young fans bursting into tears, overwhelmed by the sight of their hero in pain and the uncontrollable nature of the cobra. The segment worked precisely because it tapped into primal fears, the danger of the wild, the fragility of the human body, and the cruel symbolism of the snake itself. Revenge and rivalry, the pay-per-view clash and aftermath. That October night set the tone for one of the most heated rivalries in WWE history, culminating in a showdown at the 3rd of December, 1991 Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view. The energy in the arena was palpable, charged with anticipation as fans desperately wanted to see Randy Savage get the revenge he so richly deserved. The match itself was fierce and emotional, with Savage channeling the pain and anger from the Cobra incident into every move. Ultimately, Savage triumphed, besting Jake in a battle that felt more like a personal war than a scripted encounter. But even in defeat, Jake wasn't done with theatrics. In a chilling post-match moment, Jake slapped Miss Elizabeth, Savage's beloved wife and manager. This act was like throwing gasoline on an already raging fire, sparking what wrestling fans call nuclear heat, a level of genuine hatred and tension that few storylines achieve. The crowd's reaction was intense, some fans booing loudly while others were visibly distressed. The slap wasn't just an insult, it was a deep emotional wound that extended the bitter feud into 1992, keeping audiences hooked and invested. The Undertaker Alliance and WrestleMania 8, a complex partnership. After the Savage feud, Jake's path intertwined with another WWE legend, The Undertaker. Their relationship was complex, part mentorship, part rivalry, part uneasy alliance. Both men carried dark, enigmatic personas, and their interactions created some of the most psychologically charged moments in wrestling at the time. Together, they crafted a slow-building story of tension and intrigue, one that culminated in their match at WrestleMania 8 in April 1992. Fans were eager to see these two enigmatic figures clash, and the build-up was intense. The match itself was memorable, but bittersweet, symbolizing a passing of the torch in many ways. Behind the scenes, however, things were unraveling for Jake. He was growing disillusioned with WWE. Despite his contributions and popularity, he felt increasingly sidelined and undervalued. Jake had even lobbied for a creative position, a behind-the-scenes role that many wrestlers aspire to as a way to extend their careers beyond the ring. He was led to believe Vince McMahon had given him the job, only to have the offer rescinded due to backstage politics involving Pat Patterson's return. This betrayal struck Jake deeply. Feeling disrespected and isolated, he demanded his release from the company, a decision he later admitted he regretted. WrestleMania defeat and personal decline, the turning point. Jake Roberts' final WrestleMania appearance, where he faced The Undertaker, was deeply symbolic. It wasn't just another match, it marked a passing of the torch. The Undertaker's legendary undefeated WrestleMania streak was just beginning, and Jake's defeat cemented The Undertaker's dominance while quietly signaling a turning point in Jake's own career. Professionally, it was a milestone, a high-profile match on wrestling's biggest stage. But beneath the surface, things were unraveling. Off-camera, Jake's life was spiraling out of control. What had once been occasional alcohol use and prescription medication to manage pain and trauma morphed into something far more dangerous: crack cocaine. This powerful, destructive drug fueled a vicious downward spiral. The man who had so skillfully controlled the narrative inside the ring found himself losing control of his own life. This period was marked by chaos, heartbreak, and self-destruction. The bright lights and roaring crowds masked the darkness that followed Jake everywhere he went. His substance abuse wasn't just a private struggle. It affected his relationships, his health, and his ability to perform. It was a tragic contrast to the triumphs of his past, a reminder that even those who seem invincible on the surface can be fighting battles far deadlier than any scripted wrestling feud. From WWE to WCW, the powder keg of demons, instead of seeking help after his WWE exit, Jake made the fateful move to World Championship Wrestling, WCW. This transition was complicated by a deeply personal and painful reunion with his estranged father, Grizzly Smith, who was also wrestling royalty but had his own troubled past. Rather than providing support or stability, their reunion seemed to stir the emotional and psychological storms Jake was battling. The toxic mix of family issues and addiction created a powder keg ready to explode. Jake's time in WCW was marked by dashed hopes and harsh realities. Initially promised a lucrative $3.5 million contract, a change in management, ushered in by Bill Watts, a figure with whom Jake already had a fraught history, saw that promise slashed to just $200,000. The insult was sharp and demoralizing. With few options, Jake accepted the diminished deal, but the disappointment was palpable. During his stint, Jake aligned himself with other notorious heels like Cactus Jack and the Barbarian, and feuded with stars like Sting. Unfortunately, the quality of matches and storylines didn't match Jake's talent or potential, and dissatisfaction grew. This era in WCW only deepened Jake's struggles, heel turn in the WCW feuds a dark reinvention. After his turbulent WWE run, Jake the Snake Roberts found himself in World Championship Wrestling, WCW, a new chapter that promised fresh opportunities but also came with its own set of challenges. In WCW, Jake reinvented himself once again, but this time he fully embraced his darker side as a heel, the wrestling term for a villain. No longer the conflicted anti-hero, Jake became a ruthless, unpredictable force, aligned with the likes of Cactus Jack and the Barbarian, forming a menacing trio that disrupted the locker room and sowed chaos on the roster. One of Jake's most memorable feuds during this period was with the company's top star, Sting. Their rivalry reached a climax at the October 25, 1992, Halloween Havoc pay-per-view with a coal miner's glove match, a brutal, no-holds-barred bout where a loaded glove was the legal weapon. The match itself is often remembered less for technical brilliance and more for its raw intensity and emotional stakes. Fans were captivated by the storytelling and animosity between the two, even if the execution was somewhat rough. It was a classic grudge match, fueled by anger and pride. Finding faith and redemption, the turning point. During this challenging and uncertain period, something remarkable happened. Jake found solace in spirituality. Battling years of addiction, pain, and personal demons, he became a born-again Christian. For the first time in a long time, Jake clung to hope and faith as a foundation for rebuilding his life. His transformation wasn't overnight, nor was it perfect, but the decision to turn to religion marked the beginning of a slow but profound redemption journey. He committed himself to abstaining from drugs and alcohol, hoping to reclaim control over a life that had been spiraling for years. Jake's story of redemption caught the attention of WWE, which was always drawn to comeback narratives, especially those involving personal growth and overcoming adversity. In 1996, WWE gave Jake a second chance, bringing him back as a babyface, a wrestling hero. This new Jake was a man reborn, his character now infused with his real-life spirituality. He carried his iconic snake back into the ring, this time as a symbol of his transformation, preaching biblical lessons and using his platform to spread messages of hope and change. The company embraced this fresh start with a redemption storyline, showcasing Jake not just as a wrestler, but as a man fighting his own battles, trying to rise above his past. The King of the Ring and New Beginnings, Jake's return culminated in his run during the 1996 King of the Ring tournament, one of WWE's biggest events focused on crowning a new star. WWE built a narrative around Jake conquering not only his opponents, but also his personal demons, making his journey feel deeply authentic. The tournament peaked on June 23, 1996, when Jake faced a rising star named Stone Cold Steve Austin in the finals. Though Jake ultimately lost the match, the moment remains iconic, especially because of the post-match promo that sparked Austin's legendary Austin 316 catchphrase, forever changing wrestling history. Jake's charisma and connection with the audience were undeniable. For a brief moment, it felt like he was back on top, reminding fans why they had fallen in love with his storytelling and magnetic presence years before. He followed this up with a heated feud against Jerry the King Lawler, another top star of the era. But behind the scenes, the pressures were mounting. WWE wanted to move Jake backstage into a creative role, recognizing his wrestling mind, but also his declining physical abilities. This transition was difficult for Jake, who still wanted to prove himself in the ring. The stress of this uncertainty triggered a relapse into substance abuse. By early 1997, unable to maintain the momentum, Jake was released again. It was a painful setback, a reminder that recovery is rarely linear, especially for someone battling addiction and the emotional scars of a turbulent life. The ECW years and public struggles, the raw reality. With major doors closing in both WWE and WCW, Jake drifted toward Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, in the late 1990s. ECW's edgy, hardcore style seemed like a natural fit for Jake's dark, gritty persona. However, the intense environment was also a dangerous place for a man wrestling with addiction. Jake's substance abuse worsened during this time, culminating in one of the most candid and heart-wrenching portrayals of his life, the 1999 documentary Beyond the Mat. The film peeled back the curtain on the brutal realities behind the spectacle of wrestling, showing Jake not as a larger-than-life character, but as a deeply troubled man struggling with addiction, isolation, and the fading of his career. Later that year, at the infamous Heroes of Wrestling event, Jake's public struggles reached a nadir. He arrived visibly intoxicated and gave a slurred, incoherent promo before a chaotic and poorly received match. The meltdown was painful to watch. Fans and promoters alike were alarmed. It marked a turning point where bookings in the United States dried up, and Jake's professional future seemed bleak. Life on the indies and the cycle of addiction. Despite the setbacks, Jake refused to walk away from wrestling entirely. He continued to perform on the independent circuit, including UK promotions like All-Star Wrestling and the World Association of Wrestling. Unfortunately, the cycle of addiction and trauma persisted. There were grim rumors that promoters even kept cocaine backstage specifically for him, an unsettling indication of how deeply his struggles had embedded themselves into his day-to-day life. Jake tried sobriety several times. Each attempt met with hope, but also setbacks. The pressures of the wrestling world, the physical pain, emotional trauma, and the constant grind kept pulling him back into the shadows. In 2007, WWE made another effort to help him, offering rehab as part of a company-wide wellness initiative. Though this support was a step in the right direction, Jake still wrestled with maintaining sobriety, highlighting how addiction is a lifelong battle, not a simple fix.